All right, guys, tubes. You know, they've been around for a while, but this is still a pretty new bait class in the world of musky fishing. So a lot of guys need to learn how to use these. I want to show you some tips and tricks on how to get the most out of different tube style presentations. I've got the Savage Gear Burbot tube here. This is a worn, torn, and tested Kraken from Livingston. We've got your classic Red October and some new stuff here. But realistically, most of these presentations are the same kind of methodology. We're going to use one kind of sweeping upward motion, which I'll show you here in a second. But it's super important if you're going to use, say, like the Burbot tube. And look, it looks so similar to the guy that made it. I mean, it's like they're twins. It looks so like Danny Herbeck. But anyway, say we're going to fish the Burbot tube here. We need to have the right setup. And most of the time, you can get away with any kind of rod and reel. If we're throwing blades or topwater, you can get away with pretty much whatever you want to use as far as a rod and reel setup. But when it comes to really effectively fishing tube style presentations, we need to be concerned. So right now I'm throwing a 9'6" heavy Musky Shop shield rod, and this is a high gear. This is the high speed Tranks. Line pickup is imperative when we're fishing tube style presentations. You've got to have a quick reel or you're gonna miss most of your fish, right? Just from the impactfulness of how this retrieve works and how you have to fish these baits to be effective, you've got to have a high-speed reel. So, you know, this is a 7.6. There's a few different options, but don't grab a 5.3 to 1 and try to fish tubes. Maybe in the cold of winter or something of that nature, you could get away with it, but I'm always fishing a fast reel because we're going to need it to work the bait appropriately, and we're going to need it when we finally hook up with the fish. There's a lot of different schools of thought when it comes to leaders with tubes. I just stick with a fluorocarbon leader with a swivel, right? Because of the odd fall off of these baits and the nature of these baits on the way they're falling, and they can get twisted and things of that nature, I like to have a swivel. Fluorocarbon leader here, this is a 150-pound Musky Shop leader. It's the heaviest casting leader that we have available there, which these are tied and crimped, right? So you have extra strength there. But the 150 is going to prevent bite-offs. It's a rarity now with modern musky leaders and equipment that we would even mention a bite-off. But myself and other professional anglers that I know, the one bait that it's happened on is tubes. The very nature of these baits, the way that they hit them and how aggressively they hit them, you've got to really be paying attention to your leaders. Again, you're out fishing bucktails, topwaters, you're not, you got a leader, it's going to work. When it comes to tubes, make sure you're paying attention to not only the quality of your leader, but also making sure that you inspect, if you're using fluorocarbon, inspect it periodically throughout the day, especially after you catch a fish. I still use snaps. I know some guys will do a split ring system for tubes. If I'm trying to get dialed in, I'll just use snaps and we'll play with some different presentations. Once I really get dialed in, I don't think it's the worst idea to just run a split ring straight to that tube, because I have seen with tubes, I have seen your snaps here get opened up. And if you can imagine, this thing's falling in this nature, and Mr. Muskie comes in and he head shoots this thing, there's enough pressure there he could theoretically open that up, and I've seen it happen myself. Fortunately, he didn't lose the fish, but it's something to be aware of. Just make sure that you're paying attention to all your terminal tackle when we're fishing this presentation style. As far as tubes themselves, you've got the standard kind of the first iteration here of a musky tube, which is your Red October. This is the 10-inch. Then you have your Burbot tube. Then we've got the Kraken. So all three of these baits have some variation to them, and they do some different things. So starting with the standard Red October tube here, and they make this in numerous different sizes. This rig is a through wire. You rig these yourself, and there is a single hook rig in here with essentially a jig head that has a big hook, and then this wire that is fed off of the jig head. So we've got some information on the Musky 360 app and things that we have at the Musky Shop on the videos and things of that nature on how to rig these guys. But that's something, if you're gonna fish red October tubes, you need to learn how to rig them right, because you need to get the appropriate action out of this bait. It needs to be rigged correctly. So if you have one of these tubes and it's not working for you, make sure that you visit some of that information. Make sure you've rigged it correctly. The placement of where we actually put the lead inside of the tube can influence its action and how it's working in the water. And something with this, I always recommend on the red October is a big number 7 Musky Shop super split ring here. So you have that. Then your burbot tube is kind of a similar setup, right? But it's a little bit more pre-assembled. You don't have to do the rigging yourself on these. They don't sell a replacement body, but it's a pre-rig. But it's very, very similar in its nature, but it does not have the top hook, right? So you don't have that single hook here on the top. And what they did is, again, they offered a weighting option on this where you can remove this split ring and change the weighting on your burbot tube. So with the red October, you have the jig head inside, and you need to deconstruct this to change its weighting to hit different conditions. With the burbot tube, we can remove this and get some variance there. You can use your, and I've done it in the past with the burbot tube, you could use your Chaos Deep Threat weights. You can use any kind of weights that you have that will fit over this that attach with the split ring, and you're going to be good to go. And then with the Kraken, it has a built-in weight system. So you can remove these weights and interchange them. We have the Titan Kraken Magnus weight kit. So just with the turn of a screw, you're able to change that out. Now, you'll notice with this bait, the red October has a single top hook, where the Kraken and the burbot tube do not have that top hook, which can be on the water. You'll notice that there can be some misses with that, and it's also will be leader grabbing a bit. So that's kind of a net positive with these two presentations. You'll notice with the Kraken, it actually has 3 hooks. Burbot has 2. Now, if we're really dialed in with, say, a Kraken, I always this is my personal preference, is to remove that 3rd hook, because they're kind of head shoot, these baits, guys. That's just what they do. You'll notice when you catch fish on tube style presentations, it's like this. Most of the time, he's going to head shoot that thing on the fall, right? So that's just kind of some of the differences there. And then you can always, you'll see this if you're new to tubes, you'll see the burbot tube has a Savage blade here on the back already built into it, right? It's all one component here. And they've got this small Colorado here, about a number 6, it looks like, 5 or 6. And you can modify. Say you have a red October tube. At the Musky Shop, we sell next level mods, which are willow leaf bladed treble hooks that are already rigged up. So this is already done for you. You just put it on your red October tube with a split ring. Just replace that back hook, and now you have that modified hook that you can interchange to any different baits that you're using. As far as rigging, it's so particular to get that action that you really want out of these baits is the appropriate rigging. Again, with the Kraken, this is a replaceable skirt, hard head, so we're going to get some good hookups there. That's going to be a little bit less problematic, say, with the top hook thing. But you don't have to rig the Kraken. So you need to rig the burbot tube and rig the red October. But with the Kraken, you just slide the rubber skirt on the back here. This is stainless steel wire through it. And you'll notice I've removed that rear hook and opted for the mod hook here. And you can do so many neat things here where I'll play with it, and you see I daisy chained this on it to give it more of like a whipping action in the water and on the fall. So there's a lot of neat mods. Some people swear by the trailer hooks and the trailer blades, some don't. Depends on what your conditions are. So you got to play with that on the water and let the muskies tell you if they want trailer blades or not, but it helps you stand out when you're fishing pressured water. But let's get to the basics of fishing a tube. So we'll start with the red October tube here. Okay, let me hop up. As we get it set up here, and I'm in moderately shallow water. So how do we work these things? Here's this big hunkin' tube, right? What we're going to do is we're going to be working the rod. And the way I prefer to do it is gripping the foregrip, and I'll grip kind of under here after I make my cast, right? Taking full usage of this grip. And I'm trying to grip it in an underhanded manner, if that makes any sense. I'm not grabbing over the top. I'm grabbing kind of below the rod, right? And so when we take these baits, what we're going to try to do, Let's make our cast. It hits, and we're doing this. And if you notice, I am popping, then reeling, right? So the Red October, that is a punchy bait. You'll feel it. You can actually see it just snap down. It's going down, and we're popping that bait up. And what we're attempting to do with these style of presentations is get a jump. That bait is up and falling vertical, up, falling vertical, boom, down, boom, down. So, dependent on what kind of cover structure we're fishing, you see I grabbed some stringy grass there because we kind of drifted in shallow, but depending on what we're fishing will dictate the kind of speeds that we need to be using to get the most out of these baits. But with the Red October tube, you're going to be pumping that bait quite a bit, right? So what I want you to focus on is getting a rhythm and some coordination between your two hands here, right? So we don't want to be popping the rod and reeling, right, at the same time. We want to do that after, and we're picking up slack, if you will. We're not making the bait do anything with the reel. We're picking up the slack that it generates, right? So I've popped that up, and now it's falling, it's coming forward. I've popped that up and picking it up, right? And I'm aggressively hitting that bait, right? I'm putting oomph into it, and it's falling. It's up, and then fall, up, fall. And you'll see, we'll talk figure eights here in a second, but as we come around here, I'm really hammering that bait. You'll see quite often this happens with tube style presentations. You get a leader grab, right? Hopefully we take care of that with some other mods and rigging and get this cleaned off here. But that's what we're looking at. I mean, it's a basic. I'll actually take the bait off to kind of articulate it better here. It's a very basic kind of retrieve. Is that we've made that cast and we're lifting the bait. We're popping that tube up and it's falling quickly. So it's that up motion, reel down to the bait. Up motion, reel down to the bait. Bang, reel down to the bait, right? And that's why physically, if you see, I'm kind of up under the rod. I want to lift, let it fall. Lift, let it fall. You'll notice with your longer rods, if you really look, if I'm moving that rod from here to here on the lift, you know, that's more than a foot. We're actually moving that bait quite a bit, 2-3 feet with each sweep. So as we sweep that rod up, we've got to quickly pick that up, because what you'll always notice is 99% of your strikes are going to come on the fall. So to contend with shallow cover like the grass we're dealing with here today, to contend with shallow cover, to contend with shallow structure, that's why we need this fast reel, because he's going to hit on the fall. It's going to be up. That bait will be falling, and you'll reel into the fish more often than not. I mean, it's usually a pretty bone-jarring strike, but you'll go bang, bang, he's there, right? He's grabbing down the fall, and you've reeled into him. So you've got to expect that. That's a big trick or a big tip when we're fishing tube style presentations, is you're going to watch your line as much as you're going to watch what the bait's doing, if that makes any sense. So to display that, throw this out to a little bit deeper stuff. You need to get accustomed or acclimated to that bait's rate of fall, right? And how it's acting in the water. And you watch, okay, it's just straight falling down, straight falling down. So as we're doing this, say I make this cast, and I'm up, right? I can actually kind of judge what that line's doing. And you'll notice, kind of like ripping other rubber baits, if that line does something that it shouldn't be doing, right? The line acts funky, you need to reel in and set that fish, right? Because it's a strike. You'll be doing this, yeah, that's falling faster, or it generated slack, right? So you'll reel and there's not as much lay or lope to my line as there once was. Reel in and set, okay? That's super important. And you need to just pay attention to that on all fronts, because it can play so heavily on how successful we are. Now, another concern with tubes, if you look at this, and again, I'll just do this without a bait so it makes more sense. Physically, the way that we have to work this bait puts us in a very poor hook setting position, right? So again, I'm up under the rod. I'm ripping this bait up, right? Be aware that if they hit up here, what are you going to do? Where are you going? You have nowhere to go. You've got to think ahead. What am I going to do? Not if, not when, right? Have a game plan. So, again, fast reels. We're up and you see it fall, reel down, and then hit the fish. You have to be prepared to do this because you're going to have some area, some rod movement to use to actually generate hook setting power. And I've seen it so many times where you get into zombie mode fishing tubes, right? And you're kind of up here and you're reeled down and you've got nothing, right? You got nowhere to go. We don't have enough. Again, fast reel, fast reel, fast reel. So we're here. We can drop that rod and reel into that fish and then set vertically here. Okay? That's it, just something you've got to think about of where am I at in the motion, in the rod motion, where am I at all times? So if you're up here, drop that rod as fast as you can and then set into the fish. If you're down here, pick up the slack and bam, step into it, right? A good trick, and if you don't have a seat, you know, I've seen a lot of different guys do this. If you're at the top of this, you can actually pull back into the fish and actually kind of take a step back. But think about what we're going to do. Have a game plan in mind for what do I do here, right, to hook this fish. So from here, if I'm down, the bait is falling and there's slack line, reel into it, set. If I'm up here at the top of this rod stroke, right, I'm here, we need to generate slack. From there, we need to bow to the musky, if you will, bow the rod and then set, right? So don't get caught flat-footed when we're looking for 1 a day, which is so often the case. We need to think about these things to be more successful. So, you know, as far as that, you take, which I like the burbot tube, is a little bit easier to work in my opinion than the Red October for that style. You've got to be prepared again for how punchy these baits are. If you watch that bang in the rod, that is a lot of load. You've got a lot of load up in the rod from the bait itself. So another reason it's so imperative that we have the right tackle. If you come out with a medium heavy, or you come out with your St. Croix 7.6 twitch stick, you're not gonna have a good time, right? We want the right rod, we want the right reel. So your Musky Shop shield rod, some of your heavier chaos options, your Fenwick options, these are going to be the right models to use with a heavy action. And at times, if I'm very dialed in on a tube bite, I will make the transition and go to the extra heavy rod, right? Because you can actually use less energy, right? The rod loads up less. So once you get a feel for that maneuver and that presentation, you can use the heavier rod, and it's actually less energy in the stroke of the rod, if you will, that you have to use. So you can use the heavier action to kind of propel that bait a little bit better. So with tubes, right? Here's Mr. Danny's burbot tube. Check her out. Let it hit, and that up, right? You see, popping it up, reel to it. Pop it up, reel. And I like, and it's probably hard to catch on the camera, I like to have hop in my line, right? I don't want this straight thing where this line is just always dead ahead. It doesn't allow for any deviation in that retrieve. It doesn't allow for things to get funky. So what we want to do is find a place that we're comfortable with this tube, where we know what it's doing underwater, we have a feel for it, and leave that slightest bit of lay in your line. Like I said, when I'm retrieving this bait and say it's hopping, I'll try to get close to the camera, right? I'll pop it and I want to see that line, Jay. I want to see the line here have some lope to it, right? Like a snap. You'll see it hanging at the rod tip. So out on the water surface, out on the cast, I'm keeping my eyes kind of on the lay of that line, and I'm trying to generate just the tiniest slack when I'm reeling in. I don't want to reel all the way into the bait, not the entire way, just to fraction of a turn away from that, that's going to allow that bait to fall and deviate. It's not just going to come straight back to the boat. It's going to go left. It's going to go right. Give it enough slack line that it can have something to play with. So, you know, with every bait, when, where are we fishing these things? What are we doing with them? Right? There's never a bad time, in my opinion, to fish rubber baits. Most of your waterways, when we're fishing high pressured situations, you can pretty much count that everyone's throwing bucktails, everyone's throwing topwaters, right? These are going to get to fish that are not seeing presentations all day long. So your Red October, your Savage Gear, your Kraken, these are going to be great any time of year. And I prefer to use them on edges. If you look here, we're not up on the edge of the lake, right? And when I say edges, I don't mean the edge of the lake. On weed edges, rock edges, structural elements where we need to be deep and probative. So right now we have an outside weed edge here in front of us, right? So I'm positioning myself, I'm using live imaging and my mapping to make sure that my bait, say like my Kraken here, that's landing in those weeds, and I'm working this guy to that outside weed edge, right? I'm working him to the outside weed edge. That's what I'm targeting with this. Don't take a tube and get up in 4 feet of water and expect great things to happen. You can catch fish that way, but the best way to do it are these outside weed edges, right? Or humps. So let's say we take a body of water with humps, and we go over to that. We can get on the outer perimeter of a hump in a lake and crisscross that, right? Bomb it into a hump, hit the high point, you know, wherever the apex, the height of a hump is, cast right to that, and then work it off that edge. What I really like to do with these, especially with the Krakens, is use that little bit of hang. If you see with the Kraken, it takes just a second before that bait turns head down. I was talking about that with the regular tubes, with your Savage Gear, and with your Ninja tubes, that I'm looking for that lope in the line. The Kraken has this stop, this tiny little hang time at the apex of each of his hops, right? And so you'll see that, and that naturally is kind of built into that bait where it'll go, right? And has a lope. Creating that lope is imperative, and take advantage of that. Say we're throwing to that hump, or we're throwing the weeds here. There's actually floating weeds here in tops. You know, with the Kraken, I can take this and keep quick pops here, so it's very erratic until I've cleared out into that deeper edge. So what I'm going to focus on, if I'm just getting started fishing tubes, I'm going to focus on finding these outside weed edges, right? Generally, my boat is positioned in 8 feet to 15 feet of water, right? In general, I'm out here, you know, I'll bomb it in, and you'll see, nowhere near the edge, right? I'm nowhere close. Can't get it in there. I'm on this outside edge where everybody else, like I said, it's the middle of the day. We just now got some nice stuff rolling in. But for the most part, you have these poor conditions where muskies are not feeding shallow. They're not there. They're buried on that outside edge of weeds. Get out here, hit it, right? And hit this methodology, right? Bang, up, bang. If you notice with the Kraken, because of its lope and its different fall than a traditional tube, I keep my rod angle a little bit lower. These are physically aggressive baits, right? They can actually wear you down. I jokingly call it tuber's arm. You spend a whole week doing Red Octobers or burbot tubes, you're going to feel it. So I use the Kraken quite often as a means to reduce the physicality for myself and clients because of that hop, that little bit of impact. But say we're going to hit this with just the standard tube. Let's go to the burbot. And one thing I do like, you'll notice, again with the hook fouling situation, both the Kraken and the burbot tube are pretty good to not hook foul. You'll notice when these baits are falling, and the reason you got to watch your leader is they're falling like this and dragging your line down. So you will, at times, do not think you're doing it wrong if this happens, right? It happens to everybody where that hook gets wrapped around the leader and now you're pulling this thing all screwed up. It happens all the time because this bait is falling vertically. It's gonna end up grabbing. So, you know, again, the reduction of the hooks, one thing I do like, and you know, everybody's got different mechanics and abilities. And you'll notice, you know, depending on how people retrieve, that will influence how often they get hook fouled. So find the right tube for you. If you're constantly getting hook fouled with a burbot tube, try Kraken or try the Red October, whatever. Each bait's going to be a little bit different in the water. But again, here I am. We got kind of a weedy point here out into open water and probatively hitting these things, right? What people are not ready for quite often is how hard these fish are going to hit and how often that muskies are on these outside edges. So I can't encourage you enough. Get on these outside edges and hit them with these tubes, right? And something that needs to be said, didn't get him that time, but I did get some tasty salad. One thing that's completely different with tube presentations than anything else is boat side. And so we need to think ahead and we need to consider, what are we going to do boat side with the tube, right? With live imaging now, you can see these deep following fish, and often at times you can just see them with your own eyes. This is the one time I break the rule of getting the bait to the rod tip, right? I do not want to bring a tube up to the rod tip. What I want to do is I'm working this back. I'm going to find this happy place, which is usually about there, you know, about 6-7 feet of line to keep this hopping around by the boat, right? So I'll pitch it out. I'll come in. I'm working the bait. I'm getting here just about the end of my retrieve. Take it, pop it. Working that bait around. Don't try to take a fish that's following a bait deep or a bait that has a lope like this and get it right to the rod tip. It's not going to do much, right? We need to allow that bait to have enough line that it still has that following action that fish was on, right? So we got his attention with this. So we want to make sure that we leave that slack line there to pop. Quite often, I'm just doing this. I'm hopping it around, right? You can try to get a big oval here, but quite often, I'm just going to bop this guy around here, walk him out that way, and just bang, bang, bang around boat side, guys. So if you're going to get into tubes, get the right gear, get the right baits, get dialed in on these things, guys. They are one of the best baits you can put fish in the boat with. You got the Kraken, you got the burbot tube, you got the Ninja tube. Get on those outside edges, get the right gear, and it's going to put more muskies in your net.